Mariska Veres was born Maria Elizabeth Ender on October 1, 1947 in The Hague. Her father, Lajos, was an extraordinarily gifted violinist who saw music not as art, but as a craft. Because of that, Mariska and her sisters were taught from early childhood to accompany him on piano. Lajos was strict, demanding discipline from his children, and over time the girls began to see those long hours at the piano as punishment. They never even considered a musical career. Mariska, however, reacted differently. Under her father's pressure, her character hardened, and more in spite of him than because of him, she found comfort in music. Everything changed the day she picked up a microphone and sang. Her family instantly understood she had a natural gift. Lajos saw in that a chance for income, a father-daughter duo performing in the restaurants of The Hague. But Mariska dreamed much bigger. Her best friend at school was the radio. She mimicked singers, shifted the height of her voice, searched for shades that felt truer than everyday speech. Schoolwork quickly slipped into the background, and by 16 she had already begun her career. By 1963, European music was experiencing a small earthquake, thanks to the Beatles. The Hague overflowed with bands trying to imitate the British quartet. New groups were forming out of thin air on every street corner, so it didn't take long for a talented vocalist to be noticed. Mariska first joined Les Mystères. Within a year, the band gained a modest group of fans and even saved enough money to record a mini-album, released in a run of just 10 copies. The record sounded raw and uneven at times, but it captured Mariska Veres in the middle of becoming a real singer. The album became the end of Les Mystères and the beginning of something entirely new for Mariska. She caught the attention of the more established Bumblebees, who invited her to join them in 1966. It wasn't a huge leap, but within the Dutch music scene, it was a meaningful one. The shows were bigger, the rehearsals more professional. Mariska wasn't just gaining experience and learning how to work a crowd. She was shaping her own identity. Within a few years, Mariska Veres had become a familiar name on the Dutch scene. Other bands started calling Blue Fighters, Danny and His Favorites, General 4. She even managed to record a few solo singles, including Top Kapi in 1965. Eventually, she hit the ceiling in the Netherlands. She needed to move forward, but there simply weren't any openings. None of the bands had broken out of the local scene, and she didn't have the connections or resources to launch an international solo career. Then fate stepped in. In 1968, the Bumblebees performed at a party celebrating Golden Earring's new #1 hit, and every member of Shocking Blue happened to be there. Mariska's vocal style, so strikingly different from every Dutch singer around her, made an immediate impression on Shocking Blue's founder, Robbie van Leeuwen. He later said that Veres reminded him of Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane, not just in voice, but in her ability to command a stage. Of course, at that moment, Shocking Blue looked like a step down for Veres. The band had one failed album behind them and nothing else. But Mariska was intrigued by Van Leeuwen's ambition. In many ways, they were alike. Both had drifted through multiple bands, both wanted to create something of their own, and both dreamed of breaking out beyond the Dutch borders. Mariska had only one condition: no romantic entanglements, only music. Van Leeuwen agreed and she joined the band. Shocking Blue didn't waste a second. With Mariska Veres on board, they released At Home in 1969, and the album sounded like a signal flare, announcing that this lineup was meant to exist. The music carried Van Leeuwen's fingerprints everywhere: dark guitar riffs, Eastern-tinged melodies, and Mariska's steady, smoldering voice locked the whole construction into place. It didn't sound like a band that had just formed. It sounded like veterans proving their superstar status. And then came Venus, the cherry on top. The song shot forward instantly because it achieved something close to perfect balance. Van Leeuwen's simple, predatory melody and Veres' voice, which cut through the mix like a spotlight. Cold and passionate at the same time, her delivery created a strange universality. She recorded the song almost without emotion on her face, but with an inner pressure as if she somehow knew it would change her life. The success was so fast and so overwhelming that it immediately became a burden. Mariska wanted fame. She wanted out of the Dutch scene, but she never got a transitional phase. the sudden global attention that fell on her, and the band began pressing on her shoulders behind the scenes. Despite all her dreams and ambitions, at the end of the 60s, Mariska was still a shy and rather innocent young woman, whose favorite backstage drink was tea. Later, she admitted that the album's success made her less confident. Overnight, she faced a tidal wave of expectations, obsessive fans, and a press corps eager to sexualize her image. She said she began to feel like a doll, and that massive early success planted the seeds for problems that would grow later. In 1970, Shocking Blue released one of their most underrated records, Scorpio's Dance. It was bold, and a blend of psychedelia, folk, and Eastern motifs. Mariska's voice became softer but deeper, no longer trying to be loud but tapping into that inner spring that let power slip through even the gentlest lines. Tracks like Send Me a Postcard and Mighty Joe proved Shocking Blue wasn't a one-hit band. The group managed to hold its place on the international stage, though the second album didn't come close to matching the explosive success of the first. Meanwhile, it became harder for Mariska to live inside the star role. Even as her dream of a global stage was coming true, she longed more and more for solitude. Long tours drained her and pushed her toward depression. Alcohol became a quiet escape. In 1971, the band released third album, a more even, mature work. Here you can hear Van Leeuwen composing directly for Veres' timbre. Fewer sharp leaps, more melody, darker, richer shades. Never Marry a Railroad Man felt like a reflection on their creative union. A lush arrangement where Veres' voice sounds like it's negotiating with fate. But the album also pulled the band farther from their early explosive triumph. Van Leeuwen became increasingly fixated on recreating Venus instead of trying to build something new, while Mariska, exhausted by the demands of stardom, withdrew not only from the public but from the band itself. All of this became the beginning of the split. Over the next 2 years, the exhaustion only deepened. Endless touring schedules wore everyone down. The albums Inkpot and Dream on Dreamer came out, and you can hear that fatigue in every track. Mariska's voice was still beautiful, flawless even, but the spark had dimmed. She sounded distant, as if she were following the lines perfectly but without that fierce edge she once carried. Even so, songs like Inkpot, Out of Sight, Out of Mind, and especially I Saw You in June, revealed her uncanny gift, turning even simple melodies into emotional scenes you could practically step into. Meanwhile, Van Leeuwen was burning out. After more and more commercial failures, he became convinced Shocking Blue had doomed itself by becoming the band that made Venus. He felt trapped inside his own success and believed he could achieve far more with a new project. Mariska, on the other hand, didn't want reinvention. She just wanted a pause, rest, quiet, solitude. By 1975, Shocking Blue quietly dissolved. Van Leeuwen walked away to build something new, and Mariska received what she needed most: silence. For a while she vanished, slipping out of the public eye entirely. She reappeared only in the late 70s when Europe rekindled an interest in Shocking Blue thanks to radio rotations and nostalgia. The star status had long since evaporated, and that was exactly what allowed Mariska to feel grounded again. She had learned to keep healthy distance from audiences, from the press, from the industry itself. In a way, this was the skill she'd lacked at the start of her career. Jumping from band to band taught her how to be on stage, but not how to live off stage as a star. By the early 80s, Mariska Veres was a different woman entirely, steadier, calmer, more self-possessed. She was finally ready to return to music, but on her own terms, and the timing couldn't have been worse. The resources were there, the connections were there, but Europe had simply stopped caring. Ironically, she was finally prepared for fame, and fame had already moved on. In the mid-80s, she formed the Shocking Jazz Quartet, later known as the Mariska Veres Jazz Band, a project that became a turning point in her life. This was where her true musical identity finally surfaced. The repertoire was built around jazz standards, swing numbers, light blues, and songs that let her play with dynamics and subtle shades of tone. Her voice, once sharp and shining like glass, became richer, velvety, mature. Critics said, "This Mariska was always there, they just never gave her room to exist." In jazz, she shed the image of the mysterious rock icon. She became a musician, simply and fully, a woman who finally sounded like herself. But mainstream audiences greeted her return with a chill. By the early 90s, whether due to financial pressure or the realization that she no longer had a place as a solo act, Mariska drifted back to her origins. In 1993, she released Shocking You, pop songs from the 60s and 70s, reimagined in a jazz style. It rode the wave of European nostalgia, but it didn't come from the heart. It was commerce, nothing more. Soon after, she rejoined a revived Shocking Blue. The band didn't just try to trade on nostalgia. They even recorded new songs like Body and Soul and Angel. But new was only a technicality. Creatively, the group still dragged the weight of Venus behind them, unable to escape it even after decades. By the 2000s, Mariska Veres had accepted that her fame belonged to another era. She embraced her role as a veteran and returned to creating music for herself. After jazz, she immersed herself in traditional Hungarian and Romani music, a final artistic homecoming for a woman who spent her entire life searching for a sound that felt true. In 2003, she shocked everyone with the album Gypsy Heart, revealing to the world the musical roots she had carried with her since childhood. The album sounded alive, fiery, emotional, but never theatrical. Mariska sang as if she were rediscovering a past she once felt shy about or never fully understood. Her voice dropped lower, became velvety, fuller, filled with the shadows she only hinted at in her youth. Gypsy Heart wasn't just a record, it was an act of self-acceptance. Critics agreed. It had been a long time since an artist with such a loud past stepped into a new musical tradition with such honesty. And while Gypsy Heart only achieved modest success, Mariska Veres seemed to rediscover herself through it. Concerts, recordings, new interpretations of traditional songs. She performed with ease, with a soft smile, with that inner light that appears only when a person has nothing left to prove to the world or to themselves. This new chapter, peaceful, grounded, creatively free, could have taken her to a new peak. But in 2006, she suddenly began feeling unwell. Pain, fatigue, weakness. She blamed everything on her schedule and age. When the diagnosis finally came, cancer, there was little time left. The disease moved brutally fast. At the end of 2006, surrounded by those she loved, she passed away. Quietly, just as she had lived in her later years. Without noise, without attention, without unnecessary words. Mariska Veres was one of the rare singers who, after walking through the storm of fame, found her true voice only in silence. And her greatest achievement wasn't a hit song from the 70s. It was the fact that she endured everything life threw at her and still managed to remain honest with herself.